Welcome to this lecture on HTML forms. Now, this topic is quite extensive, and I believe it will take more than one video to get through. However, I'll just give you a rundown of all the fundamental elements that you need to know to get through forms and to get you well acquainted. So let's get started here. So let's start off with a form field or form group. We'll just make a form element like so. So form, I won't put any attributes right now. Then I'll just make a button, input type submit, and then value. So value is just what our button will have as the text, like the text that indicates, for example, finish or submit. And the cool thing about input types is that they're self-closing tags, so you don't have to have an opening and a closing tag, like so. So let's just demonstrate this real quick. Let's just open our HTML forms. Okay, there we go. So we have a finish here. That's going to be shown here, finish. And you just change the submit, which is probably more semantically, which is more user-friendly, I believe. So there we go. So submit. And here our form field, or form element here, can have two attributes, mainly action. So this is like the website that or the action is where the form data is sent, right? And then method is basically how the data is sent. It could be either post or it could be get. However, this is like more advanced stuff, dealing with backend development. But perhaps it's important trivia for now when you're learning HTML to be well acquainted with this. So action is where the form data is sent. It could also be like a website directory that you want to go. So for example, let's just say I wanted to go to a page, Eureka, as you can see here. Eureka has a message called "We have liftoff." Consequently, if I wanted to go there, I would just say Eureka, if I spell that correctly, .html. So now when I click on submit, on the submit button, it should go to Eureka.html. So let me demonstrate how this works, Rick. Okay. So going back here and we refresh changes, submit, there we go, goes to Eureka. If I submit again, goes to Eureka, so it goes to that page within the website. And our method can be either get or post, for instance. Get or post. Of course, this is like more advanced stuff. All right, now let me introduce you to a new element, which is probably one of the simplest, and it's called text. So you just enter text into this form field. I'll just demonstrate how this one works here real quick. Type equal text, and then let's go back to the page here. There we go. Type equal text. We just put text here, any text we want, and we can just go back and send. However, what if we don't want it to send if this is empty? Well, we can just use an attribute called required, like so. Save. Just make sure we refresh this. And now let's not put any text and just go submit. And it refuses to go. Why? Because of this field, this attribute here saying required. So that's our text field here. We can also have a placeholder, which is like a hint. So you just say have a placeholder type of attribute. Let's just say enter your name. So there we go. Enter your name. So it just gives you a hint or a clue. And yeah, basically I could just say my name is message submit, for instance. There we go. So let's move on to the next type of input. Input type equals number. So here we're just entering pure numbers. Just to show this. Okay. And you know what? Let me actually just put a line break because these are like inline elements. So they lined side by side instead of block elements, which usually have a new line. Okay, let me just, I think I need to just make it more legible and more presentable. This is not how you do that. That's how you do that, rather. And we are actually, you can actually leave it like this. You can actually neglect the forward slash, as was already stated in the previous lecture. And let's just show this here real quick. There we go. So there we have, we can just enter a number here as a placeholder. Let's just say enter your age or something. So your age. There we go. So there, we can just enter our age. And the cool thing about this is you can set attributes called min. So min age could be 1 year old. Maximum age, let's just say, is 10 for demonstration purposes. And let's refresh. And here, if I go, you see, I can't go past the age of 10 because of the maximum attribute. And see here. And of course, it doesn't submit because value must be less than or equal to 10 because of the constraints set by this attribute. Okay, cool. And now another cool thing here is the step attribute. So step 2, that means it will move in increments of 2 as I click the arrows here. Let me just demonstrate. So see, it'll move in steps of 2. So it starts off at 1. 1 plus 2 is 3. 3 plus 2 is 5, 7, and 9, etc. Like that. Of course, we've reached the maximum already. So that's what step means. All right. So another cool thing here is the password field. Okay. So again, you just go input type. Now type equals password. Excuse me, password. So, and like that. And here, just to give it some space, you just copy these two. There we go. And there we go. Right. So when I enter password, it shows up like that. Of course, there are other attributes that exist with password. Name, for instance, I could also put name in all of these. But name is usually used for like back-end handling. So I could just say name here, your name, for example. Name here equals your age. And in the previous lecture, I already introduced the ID. So you can also have an ID attribute here, right? Previously, we just used the ID for navigation. In this case, in other cases, we may use the ID for example, programmatically, we want JavaScript to interact with this form field, or we can use CSS to sort of to add some styles to our form field. So these are some of the attributes here that are basic. However, for a purely HTML course, it might be just trivial details that will be like put in the notes for references, for future references, right? So password that we have there, and we can also have an email input. So just go here, input type equal email. Then you just say required if I wanted to. It also has this required attribute if you want to. Okay, and I can also like put a placeholder here. Your mail at your domain.com, for instance. Yeah, something to that effect, and then I can go br like so. Let's make a new line. Yeah, there we go. Basically it. And also an important thing to note here is I've used these types of forms in a recent project. Say for instance, I've used a number field here, like to make a basic subtraction, multiplication, sort of an arithmetic trainer here. And here I've just used a number field again, so 6 minus 4 is 2, for example. And I can just say mark here, and we got a tick, so forth, so on. So that's just one application of these fields. So the other fields, for example, we can just use a drop down. Just make a drop down here, call it select, select, select. Okay, and then we proceed to give some options. Options. Okay, these are sort of like required. And let's just say we have 3 fruit, for example. You can just say ID is equal to fruit. Okay, this is for like styling and for interacting with JavaScript. And I will just say this is apple, orange, and then like banana. Here I could just put value equal apple, value equal banana, orange rather, and then finally value equal banana, like so. And okay, now I just have to demonstrate this, so I have to go back to my page here, excuse me, and then we have to refresh a little bit. There we go. See, that's how a drop down menu works. Text area, that's how you sort of declare it. Text area, and just to show this a little bit, there we go. So we have our text area here, and we can just write stuff down here. Now it looks pretty small, but we'll correct it later. And we notice here that there's no line break, so we have to manually add a line break. So text area, and here I can just add a line break before and after, like so. Let's refresh. There we go. Here you can sort of resize it. If you don't want it to be, if you want to resize it by default, or you want to set a default size, you can just say rows, right? This will give you like the vertical direction, say row 50. So just watch how it changes in the vertical direction here, the y-axis. There we go. And what if I go columns? So columns attribute is calls, and I go 50. And similarly, it sort of resizes like so. And certainly you could have your ID attribute too here. So ID, you can call it whatever you want to call it. You could also have your name attribute, very useful for backend development, right? Okay, and now let's move on to the next element here, which I think it will be the file upload. Yeah, file upload. So how do we upload files? Type equal file. It's very simple. You just notice this pattern with input type, and here we have input type equal to file. And then name, I could have my file. Same thing, I could do that with ID as well, that ID attribute. Except now I can have this cool attributes called accept. So the types of file extensions I can accept are JPG. Let's sort of list them like so. JPG, .png. These are image types, of course. And let me demonstrate how this works. But before I do that, let me make sure that there's some line space to make it more presentable. Alrighty, let's go. Let's go down now and choose file. So choose file would be something like this. Yeah, we could just choose a file here, like that, and there you go. We got a selection. So the other ones that exist are checkboxes. So let me demonstrate how a checkbox works. So input type equal checkbox. Again, we notice that pattern of just input type, and then there's a cool attribute here called checked. If you have this attribute called checked, it will automatically check. And then something like subscribe to channel. Then let me just add some line breaks. And then something like send newsletter or something. I'm just going to say here send newsletter or receive accept newsletter. Right, let me just add some line breaks. Excuse me. Just add some line breaks here. BR. Again, that / is not necessarily mandatory, but it will be mandatory when you're dealing with React, as was already stated. So let me just do this real quick. And there we go. So I have the checked attributes, which means this will be checked. What happens if I remove the checked attributes here? Let's go to this, and let's just say I remove the checked attribute. So it will no longer be checked by default. Let's just demonstrate. There we go. So it's not checked by default. And then let's look at radio buttons. So radio buttons are just like input type radio. Again, we have that same motif, just input type equals radio, and then like value, let's just say values equals mail. There we go. So let me just check this out. There we go. Okay, there's no like mail here, so you just put the text mail. There are also advanced ideas like labeling your form fields. So you could use label 4, and when you have label 4, you should have the name attribute here. You should have the name attribute. I'll just show how this works very soon. But for now, let me just demonstrate this a little bit. All right, so let's go. There we go. We have mail. And certainly, you could also have it checked by default, I believe. So let me just show this. So by default, it's not checked. And then here, just say checked or selected, I believe. If it's not checked, it's selected. So let's see. There we go, checked. So mail is checked. And what if I wanted to make a nice little label here instead of writing mail here? To the side, I could just say label. So I could just use the label element. I could use the label element for all of these actually, all these input types. And then it should be 4 equals mail, and I should write your mail. And the trick is here is that you should have the name called mail. Okay, there you go. So nothing changed, and let's just say it was female, even though it says male there. So female, I could change this. Female. Just to ensure that this works. There we go. So it works like nicely here on the side. So that's how you do labels, and I'll just give you some references of how references and examples of how you can go about using labels in the text version of this. However, I think I ran you through all the basics that you needed. So you needed an input type, you needed just a field, you needed numbers, right? You needed passwords, you needed your email, you needed your drop-down menu, you needed your text field, you needed your choose file, you needed your submit button, of course, just submits the form, you needed your checkbox, you needed your checkbox, and then you needed your radio, and of course, don't forget you needed your drop-down menu. So these are the fundamental elements of your HTML forms. There are also advanced concepts like form validation, making sure that you stick to this kind of format, right, before you submit. So if you don't stick to the proper email format, when you press submit here, it might give you an error message and so forth. So those are advanced concepts. There are also other pretty cool HTML5, not just attributes, but also input types, right? So you could have type color, type data, type range. So range will be like a volume button, type search, type tell, type URL. And all of these will be in the reference sections. For now, this will be just your basics, the fundamentals that you really need to know to get you started with a fundamental understanding of HTML. So thank you very much.